Good morning, everyone. Here, we all have gathered here by online mode for the national level webinar on research methodology. For this, we have our resource person for today's session, Dr. Sunil Kumar Singh, who is Associate Professor at Guru Ghasidas University, Bilaspur, Chhattisgarh. We have with us Vice Principal of our college, Mr. C.D. Bhosle sir, Head of Chemistry Department, KBP College Vashi, Dr. R.D. Mohite sir, and all my colleagues and students from this institute and all the colleagues and students from other institute also. To deliver today's first session, we have with us Dr. Sunil Kumar Singh, who will be guiding or enlightening us about the research methodology. Research methodology is the specific procedure or techniques used to identify, to select, to process, and to analyze information about a topic. Research is creative and systematic work undertaken to increase the stock of knowledge. It involves the collection, organization, and analysis of information to increase understanding of a topic. I request Vice Principal of our college, Mr. C.D. Bhosle sir, for the opening remark of this seminar. Mr. C.D. Bhosle sir.
Good morning to all. May I audible, madam?
Yes, sure, sir.
Okay. Good morning to all. Respected Dr. Singh Sunil Kumar, Associate Professor, Guru Ghasidas University, Bilaspur, Chhattisgarh. Dr. Praveen Walke, Associate Professor, Department of Nanotechnology, Mumbai University. Department, Dr. Ramesh Mohite, and my dear students. Today, we are here for a national level online seminar which we organized on research methodology subject. We have Dr. Singh Sunil Kumar from Guru Ghasidas University, Bilaspur, and Dr. Praveen Walke
to find solution to a problem. Having known what the research means, we should also have some idea about are there any variants in this? Is there type of research? Yes, research can be divided into descriptive versus analytical, applied versus fundamental, quantitative versus qualitative, conceptual versus empirical. Let us see one by one what does descriptive versus analytical means. Descriptive research includes surveys and fact-finding inquiries of different kinds. In analytical research, the researcher has to use, yes, that's the internet problem. I don't know. My Wi-Fi is working properly. What should I do? At my end, it is showing. Can you hear me? Am I audible? But the video is not appearing, isn't it? Is it okay now? Can you see it now, sir? All right, all right. I am logging out, okay? Then how to do it? Okay, okay. I have now stopped sharing. Yeah. I have again come on the slide share. Is it visible now? Okay. So I was talking about types of research, and we have descriptive and analytical. Then we have applied versus fundamental. Applied research aims at finding a solution for immediate problems facing a society or an industrial business organizations, whereas fundamental research is mainly concerned with generalizations and with the formulations of a theory. Gathering knowledge for knowledge's sake is termed pure or basic research. This is the difference between applied and fundamental research. Next type is quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative research is based on the measurement of quantity or amount. It is applicable to phenomena that can be expressed in terms of quantity. Qualitative research is concerned with qualitative phenomena, that is, phenomena relating to or involving quality or kind. Next in this series is conceptual versus empirical. Conceptual research is that related to some abstract idea or theory, whereas empirical research relies on experience or observations alone, often without the regard for system and theory. It is data-based research, coming up with conclusions which are capable of being verified by observation or experiment. Now, having known the type of research, we must also know what should be the objectives of research. Anybody who wants to do research, they have to have some objectives behind it. So what could it be? To gain familiarity with new insight into the phenomenon, to accurately portray the characteristics of a particular individual, group, or a situation, to analyze the frequency with which something occurs or its association with something else, to examine the hypothesis of a causal relationship between two variables. Then next is research approaches. In order to perform the research, what should be your approach? Two basic approaches to research are quantitative approach. This I have already told you what quantitative research is. So quantitative approach, we can understand like research is to form a database from which to infer characteristics or relationships of population. Experimental approaches, characterized by much greater control over the research environment, and in this case, some variables are manipulated to observe their effect on other variables. Next is simultaneous approaches. Involves the construction of an artificial environment within which relevant information and data can be generated. Then there is a qualitative approach to research. Qualitative approach to research is concerned with subjective assessment of attitude, opinions, and behavior. Then, what could be the significance of research? Now, this largely depends upon the result we get after performing the exercise, which is termed as research. What could it be? To promote the development of logical habits of thinking and organization, to solve various operational and planning problems of business and industry, to generalizations of new theories. Because in science, we are accustomed that any theory which develops has to be restored so that the future generation, as and when wants, they can use it. Now, let us see what is criteria of good research. Like many students, they perform research, many scientists in industry and research institute, they are performing research. What should be the criteria for good research? They can be the purpose of the research should be clearly judged. Now, this first point is very important for anyone who thinks of doing research. Because if he is having some ambiguity, slightest of ambiguity regarding what he wants to research, he is not going to land with a clear-cut findings, or he cannot correlate the data. The research procedure used should be described in sufficient details. Now, if those who are doing research or those who have experience of getting some scholars, then they must have come across. There are many research papers which are not very clear. They don't describe the procedure in full, or they will hide it. So this cannot be a criteria for good research. The researcher should report with complete frankness flaws in procedural design and estimate their effects upon the findings. Again, this point states that one who has done research and has written a paper or a document, he or she must be very clear in penning down the difficulties he or she met, what are the shortcomings of the procedure, and how it is superior to other reported procedures. The validity and reliability of the data should be checked carefully. Now, this again is a rigorous phenomenon in research. You have to generate a meaningful data. Now, generating meaningful data does not mean manipulation. In science, we have to perform the same experiments number of times and record the findings. In arts, one has to increase the members of the segment for concluding their findings. Greater confidence in research is warranted if the researcher is experienced. So these were the criteria of good research. Now, let's see qualities of good research. If someone's research is good, how we can say it is good? It should have been systematic, it should have been logical, it should have been empirical, and it should be replicable. If it is not replicable, then we don't consider it as a good research. Now, coming to the next category in this field, we have seen what research is, what are their types, what are the good research. Now we have to discuss about research methodology, because any research has to have some methodology, the procedure by which you are going to achieve that conclusion. So let us see methodology and method. The study of the general approach to inquiry in a given field. This may be termed as methodology. Method, the specific techniques, tools, or procedures applied to achieve a given objective. Research methods in economics include regression analysis. Now, this is there is a term called regression analysis, which, it is a statistical study which gives you confidence in selecting the data. Mathematical analysis, operations research, survey, data gathering, etc. We can say research methods may be understood as all those methods, techniques that are used for conduction of research. So here we are coming across methods and techniques. So let us see what these two terms means. At times, a distinction is also made between research techniques and research methods. Research techniques refer to the behavior and instruments we use in performing research operations, such as making observations, recording data, techniques of processing data. Next in this series is research methods refer to the behavior and instruments used in selecting and constructing research techniques. For instance, the difference between methods and techniques of data collection can be better understood from the details given in the following slides. So here, basically you see, in order to perform a research, the preliminary work is to judge what you want to do, understand, and then design your thoughts, how you have to meet that requirement. And once you decide this, you land with methods. There are many methods to opt. Okay, like in chemistry, we have, say, synthesis. So synthesis has got vast variants. You have many different types of synthesis. So in that way, you have to judge, and then you have to come on techniques. Whatever data you collect, data means inferences, which you pen down in the form of yield, time taken, temperature, solvent, particular solvent, all this is a set of work which you perform to collect the inference how the molecule has formed or what molecule it is. And then you go to technique. Techniques can be many. You have chromatography, you have spectroscopy, and so on and so forth. So anything which you are using to find out what the obtained result is can be termed as techniques. Now here we have library, one of the strongest source of knowledge. Now in my days, we didn't had any services online for these libraries. And I remember I had to travel all the way to BARC, and in Delhi, I had to go to this CSIR libraries to collect data. And that was all, you have to sit from morning till night and pen down the abstract cards. And then you start your scrutinizing. So library plays very important role. Analysis of historical recordings of notes, content analysis, tapes and films, listening and research records analysis. Now this library is not only concerned with the journals, may it be scientific or arts or commerce. They also have audio-visual collections, okay, which are being published by various agencies. Analysis of documents, statistical compilation and manipulations, reference and abstract guide, contents analysis. So these are all what we perform, the act performed when we are looking at any journal or any a book from which we have to learn how we will proceed our research. Then you have field. Now this again, for chemistry it is very rare, but for other disciplines like zoology, botany, or let's say for economics, e-commerce people, this field work is also very important. Non-participant direct observational behavior scales, use of scorecards, etc. Research observations, participant observation, interactional recording, possible use of tape recorders. So this is the first one, no? No. Then comes mass observation, recording mass behavior, interview using independent observers in public places. Mail, questionnaire, identification of social and economic backgrounds of respondents. Opinionaire. Now this is somebody's opinion. It is listed down in a book or the journal of that area, which is used to opine regarding the one's aim or subject. Use of attitude scales, projective techniques, use of sociometry scales. This is what is working as a tool or technique in the area, that is arts area. Personal interview. Interviewer uses a detailed schedule with open and closed questions. Now these are again, they are not related to science, they are related to arts and humanities. Focused interview. Interviewer focuses attention upon the given experience and its effects. Group interview. Small groups of respondents are interviewed simultaneously. Now, these are all dealing with, arts area, humanities area, where you do not have much literature for your particular work to conclude your aim, to conclude your hypothesis. So you have to interrogate, you have to take interviews, you have to go in field, observe the section of mass, people, a particular area or particular religion, in order to do conclude a particular hypothesis for the research one is doing. Telephonic survey. It is used as a survey technique for information.
Right. So these are the generalized terms about the research. In the dictionary, they have made a very good statement about the research. So what they made the statement or defining, they have already defined the term research in a such way that there is a careful investigation or inquiry, especially through the search for a new facts in any branch of the knowledge. Right? It should not restricted to only the science or social science or humanity, any branch of the knowledge, right? Where if you want to find out the new facts or search the new facts by using the careful systematic studies or inquiries, right? So this is the proper definition already stated in the Oxford Dictionary, right? So this is a sort of research. Now, we need to understand why this has to be done. But before going to that, we need to have the objectives, right? Research objective. Before going to do any kind of study or research or value addition, you should already set your objectives, right? For example, here I have listed some of the objectives. There might be many more objectives in different case of the studies, but these are the more generalized objectives which I would like to highlight here. So what are they? To gain the familiarity with a new insight into the familiar. Right. So, if there is any phenomenon, right, you need to go more deeper into that phenomenon, right, and you need to get a familiar with a new insight. For example, let's say if Einstein, right, so if you find, let's say Newton, forget about the Einstein at the moment, just consider the example of the Newton. Right? Newton was sitting down the apple tree, apple has fallen down, and then there is already phenomenon, right? Why this apple is falling down, right? But no one has curiously seen towards that moment, right? Already the phenomenon was there. But Newton had thought about those phenomena, why this apple has fallen down, right? And then he tried to get familiar with that phenomenon. What is that phenomenon? Why this apple has come down, right? So this curiosity is much more required to do the research or find the innovations, right? So then later what happened? The another objective is just to accurately describe the characteristic of particular individual group and situations, right? Then this Newton might have thought about describing why this has fallen down, right? So if you change fruit, or if that fruit is, until it is hanging on the tree, it won't fall down. As soon as it detached with the tree, immediately it falls down, right? So why these characteristics happen? Why this happened, that accurately someone has to investigate, right? So therefore, this is another research objective, that you should accurately describe the characteristics for a particular situation, right? And that should be another research objective. Third research objective should be to analyze the frequency with which something occurs, right? So you need to analyze how frequently that apples fall down from the tree. So someone will realize that all the time these apples falls down on the floor, right? So all the time it is falling down. It means how frequently it has done. It is a usual phenomenon, right? Then another thing is to analyze whether it is associated to something else. So for example, let's say if you change the weight of that particular apple, right? What is the time it requires to fall down? Right? So that might be another association of that apple falling down with respect to the weight and size of that particular apple and their connection with the time. So how long it will take to fall down? Is there any correlation? Right? Or is there any correlation with the distance? Right? So if you increase the distance or decrease the distance, right? What times it took to reach at the top of the floor? Right? So these are the different critical analysis or research objectives is required, right? So you have to analyze frequently which something occurs, or is there any correlation or association with something else like external parameters, right? So we are going to think about this objective by systematic manner, how the research methodological methods can be used to do these things, right? So the relationship between two or many variables. Just now I have said, right? So the distance of the apple and flower, size of the apple, weight of the apple, right? So these all things are very important to examine the theory. Right? So we have to develop the theory. Is there any theory? Is there any correlation between the research methodologies, right? So if someone will cover all these 4 types of the objectives, then he will be having a good path or proper path towards the research, right? So to do that, so to do that systematic objectives, to follow the systematic objectives, we need to have different research methods and methodologies, right? But always, many times we find people are highly confused in between the research methods and methodology. So what is the research methods? Research methods are nothing but the methods which researchers adopt for conducting the research studies. So that is the actual experimental methods which people are using to follow the research studies, right? But what is the methodology? Methodology is a path, is the process, right? For example, we are traveling for miles, right? So to travel that miles, we need to have proper address, and that address is nothing but the methodology. But the car which is traveling or which is taking to the destination, that is your research method. Understand the difference? So the research method is nothing but the real researcher method which adopted by the researcher for the research studies. But the research methodology is the way which is leading you towards your goal and destination, and that goal should be the solution of the research problem, right? So in order to solve any research problem, you should have the systematic process, systematic way, and then only this systematic way is termed as a research methodology. And today we are going to see the details or some part of the research methodologies. What are the skills, what are the methods, what are the steps in research methodology in order to do very good research, right? And research methodology can be termed or can be defined as science of studying how research is conducted, right? So it is a science how the research should be conducted systematically and scientifically, right? So this is the major difference between your research methods and research methodologies. Okay, so let's have a look on significances of the research. What are the significance of the researches? Why we need to do all those things, right? So the Hudson maxim, what he made the statement about the significance of the research is, all the process is born in inquiry, right? So you should inquiry, you should have the queries in your minds, you should have the doubt. Doubt is often better than the overconfidence. For it lead to inquiry, and inquiry lead to invention, right? Like Newton, I gave you an example of the Newton, right? So Newton had a doubt about this one. Newton had doubt that why this apple has fallen down, right? And then he started inquiring, he started finding out the characteristics of that, and then he reached up to the invention of the Newton's law, right? So this is the significance of the research, that all progress is born of the inquiries, and the doubt is often better than overconfidence, right? There are many people all the time, they are very overconfident. Rather than understanding the phenomenon, analyzing the things, they are simply making the random statements and show, they are very overconfident that they know everything. But that is not the case, right? So you should have the doubt always, and that doubt will lead you to inquiries, right? So inquiry, and due to that inquiry, you will start to dig out the things. You should start to reach up to the phenomenon which is related to that conditions, and then you can reach up to the invention, right? And that's what the Houston maxim has said. So what is another significance is research inculcates scientific and inductive thinking, right, which will promote the development of logical habit of thinking in an organization, right? So all the time you should apply your own logic, right, to the frame of references and results data while analyzing. Always people are using the logics, right? And logical thinking or critical thinking is all the time important significance of the research. If someone has a doubt of something, let's say, right, like Newton has a doubt why this fruit has fallen down. Similarly, we are doing so many things around us, and that time we always have doubts. So let's say how to identify the researcher or research attitude of the somebody. If someone is explaining you, let's say, one term or one ideology, right, that time 4 different people sits and they are listening the same thing what you are appealing to everybody. But at the same time, only 1 or 2 people raise some questions. They have some doubts, they have some curiosity, and that time you can easily identify the research attitude in that person. Why that person want to understand behind and in between the gaps and behind the phenomenon. If someone is curious to know the foundation of the statement, then we should identify him as the research attitude person, right? And therefore, this logical habit, questioning, inquiries, all those research problem can define in such a way that, let's see. So that there should be the gap. We have to identify the gap or uncertainty in the decision makers' existing body of knowledge. If there is existing knowledge, right? And if you want to find out, there should be the gap or glitch and or uncertainty in that particular knowledge, right? That is inhibiting the efficient decision making, right? So because of these glitches and gaps, you are not able to efficiently draw the conclusion. So you have to identify those things, right? And that gap experimental, we can say. So this is nothing but the applied research. So there are the 2 types of the research problems in the basic research and applied research, right? And so anyone can define basic as well as applied problems, right? Just finding the gap between this. So there is a simple question to define the research problem is ask yourself one key question, right? And then find out where do your interest lies. For example, if I ask myself a question that why all the people or all the electricity doesn't come from the photovoltaics or solar cell, right? As solar cell is a clean energy resources, why all the time we are using any other resources like a coal, like a hydraulic energy generation plants, right? So why people are using all those things? If sun is available here all the day, then why we are not using the solar cells? So how can I define the problem of the solar cell then? Where do your interest lies, right? Because solar is come into both, even the basics as well as applied. So there should be the gap in theoretical work and application work. Because in the theoretical part, solar cell has shown some other results, and if you go to application part, real-time part, it shows some different results. So there is a gap between your basic knowledge as well as your applied results, right? Application and results. So what is the gap in between these two? Then to fulfill this gap, what sort of problems are there that I need to identify? And amongst those problems, which problem I would be interested in, right? So this is how the research problem should be defined, right? So let's say defining a research problem, there should be some steps should be followed, right? So while defining the research problem, right, it should have clarity, clear picture, right? So until and unless you define the clear research problem, it is not easy for you to tackle it, right? Therefore, the defining a research problem properly and clearly, which is very important part of the research study, right? And it must not be accomplished hurriedly. You should take some time to identify the problem, right? So what are the different tips or techniques you need to accomplish during your research problem identification? So here I have listed some of the steps sequentially. So this sequential step has to be followed to find out the research problem. So what are those? Statement of the problem in a general way, as I said, the solar cell, for example, why people are not using the solar cell regularly to generate the electricity. Then understanding the nature of the problem. I should understand the nature. What is the nature of the problem at the applied level? Because it is very costly. It is not economical, right? So it is why it is not economical, right? Then another question arises in my mind: why it is not economical? Why it is very costly? The solution. So then I have to search the literature. I have to survey the available literature and find out why it is costly. And then I understood it is based on the silicon, and silicon is very, and therefore the cost of these solar cells goes very high, right? Then to reduce those costs, what should I do? That another question comes in my mind. Then developing the ideas through the discussions, right? Then I have to develop the different ideas based on the discussions or literature. So is it possible to reduce the cost of the solar cells? Yes, it is possible, right? Yes. Then how I can do this? Then rephrase the research problem into working proportions, right? So this is the last step. That okay, now I come to know I have a different ideas to reduce this. Then I have to really rephrase those ideas in a such way that it can go to the working proportion. It can go to the working. So what are the ideas? Let's say, for example, I need to improve the efficiency of the solar cell. At the moment, let's say efficiency is not more than 30%. Make a technology. Can I use the methodology to improve this efficiency so that though the price is high, if efficiency improves, then the compensation of efficiency ratio will go down, and then people will prefer this technology. And so I have to reframe my research problem, how I can improve the efficiency of that solar cells. Then it comes to the materials, then silicon, then device application, and all those things. So that is the later part. But identifying the research problems, you need to follow such steps. One part, search the literature properly. You don't do the groundwork properly, you will be lost in between, right? So you will never find out the proper steps to pursue your research problem. So this literature is another important issue. So let's say once your problem is formulated, is designed, then related to your problem. So you have to do the extensive research, literature search about the solar cell technologies, right? So why someone has to do the literature review? So literature review will help you to refining the statement of the problem. So you will refine, you will go more specific definition or more specific statement of your problems, right? So just as I said, efficiency has to be improved in the solar cells. But efficiency should be improved. It means what exactly you required. to improve the efficiency, you should have proper band gap of the material, stability of material. You should have, you should have the proper p and n junction formation, right? There should not be the loss of electrons. So those who are in science background, they understand what I mean, or what is the example, which example I'm studying you. So these sort of solar cells, how those efficiency will be improved. So there are the four different methods to improve these. See, and that is how you are refining the statement of your problem, right? So initially I was thinking about why solar cells have not been used for the electricity generation. From there, it is very costly. From there, I came to how can I reduce the cost. So if I can't reduce the cost, what else I can do is I can improve the efficiency. So to improve the efficiency, what should I do is to choose the proper material which absorbs the light, large amount of light, right? And then we generate large number of electrons, and we should not recombine very easily, so that that can be taken out from the solar cells. So efficiency to work on these. Then strengthening the argument, right? How I can strengthen my different steps required to reach up to my initial goal. So it helps to get familiar with various type of methodology. Now, the methodological, I understood these things has to be done, right? But to do all those things, what sort of method research need to do? And based on that, I can come to some conclusion whether I have succeeded to improve the efficiency of the solar cells or I have not. Right. So to reach up to that conclusion, I need to do several efforts. Right. And in that case, before doing all this, I have to design my study. Right. So designing study based on the background of the review literature search. Okay. So collect the information of the literature search and you can design your study. Right. But while doing this kind of research literature search, you should ask question to yourself that can be answered by your literature review. So what are those questions? Let's have a look on some of the questions which you ask yourself while doing literature review. First one is, what are the major issues and debate about my research problem? What is the exact status of that issues and debates all across the world at the global level? What is happening related to my research problems? Right? What are the debatable points and what are the major issues that I need to find out? Then another question is whether the research questions already have been answered by someone else, right? There are maybe several questions come in our mind, but we never know if somebody has answered or not. So you try to explore, is there anybody has taken any efforts to solve those problems or anybody have already answered those problems that you already have to do during your literature search, right? Then what is the chronology of development of knowledge about my research problem? So to develop knowledge about the research problem, what chronology I need to be followed? That you have to find out from your literature review, right? And then during that chronology, you should have knowledge about your key theories, the concept, ideas known about your particular topic, right? Until and unless you have the theoretical knowledge or foundation knowledge, then you cannot go to the research methodologies, right? And therefore, you should know the key theories, key concept in that particular, like key theories, it means PN junction theory, you should know for the solar cells, for example, right? Solar cells efficiency calculations, right? What are the band gap is required for the materials, right? So these are the different theories, and in which cases losses will happen more, in which cases losses will happen less, right? So all this information, all these concepts and theories and ideas you should know while, or you should rather than you should get a knowledge about those during your literature search, right? Another one is what directions and methodologies are indicated by other researchers, how other researchers are trying to tackle the problem, what are the different methods, methodologies, and experimental tools people have been used to understand those problems. That should be known. And then only you can design your own methodologies. You can find out the glitches, problems, or improvement in your methodologies, or you can simply follow the similar methodology by the different materials or different parameters, right? So it will help you to design your own methodologies, right? Or own methods. So, and then only you can think of how can I bridge the gap. Like already people have done this part. My goal is this, and there is some gap in between. So if I need to fulfill those gaps, what advancement I need to do during my experimental work, or what advancement I need to do in my methodologies. So how differently I can tackle this? Is there any value added knowledge required to do this? So that gap need to be identified, right? And that you can logically, based on your review, you can logically think of how can I bridge this gap, right? Or you can find out, are there any gaps in the knowledge of the subject? Or is there any lacking knowledge? Or is there any lacking phenomenon in this? Can I introduce something new to enhance this? Right? And then these all questions need to be answered while doing the literature review. Okay. But in the literature review, nowadays, there are the different sources available, huge sources for the literature review is available. Right? So usually the traditional way people use the books, they use the textbooks, monographs, edited corrections. But the internet nowadays is the major source of the literature, right? So you have everything on a single click, right? So there are the different internet sites. You can go to the Google Scholar, you can go to either indexing and abbreviation of journal search engine that I will talk about some time. I will talk about the indexing, what is the indexing important, what are the H index and all those things. But this internet is available everywhere, and all the knowledge are now available on the internet, right? But there are others also, like journal articles. They can, by using internet, you can access the journal articles as well. So which journal articles need to be followed, that we'll have a discussion a little bit about this. Then virtual vital statistics, Sensex, government records, surveillance systems, surveys, all those things are also used as a literature. Then international organization documents like WHO, UNICEF documents they are publishing their own documents. What are the major problems at the moment in worldwide problems? They usually document those problems. What are the efforts worldwide people have taken to tackle those problems? All these documents are available online. So you can go and explore these different sources of the literature. There are different past dissertation. Already people have done a lot of MPhil, PhD degrees and various degrees, thesis, master theses on different problems. So that would be another literature review or small, background work for all of you is ready. There are in media, there are various news in magazines, there are different articles usually coming, and that can be also applicable for the literature reviews. So indexing and abstracting journal search engines, that is very important part, which we will see here. But before going to that, I will just fastly wrap up the literature review part. Okay, so in the literature review, what are the major problems people are facing is that finding too much. In the literature review, sometimes what happens, you lost in between. You just go to the internet, click, write the topic or write the problem, and you will get several data, huge data, and then you get confused. Right? You get lost in between. So this should not happen, right? So many citations, and it is endless time, lot of time it requires, and you get dragged by one site to another site to another site, and you lost in between. So finding too much is the major problem in the literature review. And another problem is finding too little, right? Or sometimes you didn't find anything. You will find only 2-3 papers or only 2-3 articles of the similar thing. And that doesn't make a good sense, because it will not lead you to the very good systematic design of your work. So these are the two basic problems of the literature review. So that both the things has to be avoided. And then important step you need to do during the literature review is take thorough notes. If you come to the very good article, First of all, write that article source. Then you write down the important highlighted point of that article. Take a small notes, so that you know what happened. Next time, if you go for the literature search, you may not get the same paper. Or if you try to find out the similar readed work, what you read before, that may not possible, or sometimes it may not available for you online. Right? Then you lost, and therefore, it takes a lot of time to search that previous readed paper. Sometimes you may not reach to that, and then you lost very important information in that paper. So therefore, taking the notes is a good habit during the literature review. Then look for the references to papers, right, which can be most useful journal papers you can use, and then cross references also you can cite while doing your research work. Then identify the authors. That is another important trick in this literature review. That if you are working on, let's say, solar cell or any other area like synthesis of some molecules, novel molecules, so you can identify who are the potential researchers in those fields across the globe, and then follow them, the subject area wise, and then follow them. Simply, you will lead to very good, important publications, important material, literature material related to that subject. Right. So literature review, there are different laboratories, institutional laboratories available, and many institutional laboratories nowadays have e-journal subscription. So you can have, online access of those journals. If not, then you can go to library and access those kind of journals, either hard copy or you get an online subscription. So this is the part of the literature review. Okay, so to understand about, during the literature review, we are always curious about which has to be followed, which should not be the followed, right? So many times, people are thinking about important academic journals. There are huge number of academic journals, right? Then we will be in trouble that which journal I need to be followed, right? But usually the indexing journals need to be followed. Why indexing journal? Let me come to the indexing first. So indexing was first defined by the British Indexing Standard, right, in 1988, right, to locate the information about the available documents, right. So there are many commercial indexing sites. So indexing site means what? So quality indexing services, for example, PubMed, Scopus, MS, and all those bodies, right. So what do you mean by the indexing? So a good indexing body, what they do, let's say if there is a PubMed journals or Scopus, these are the bodies, right? So they are indexing by their standards, right? So to standardize those journals, they find out these are the following important things, and based on those criteria, they index those journals, right? And you have to follow index journal only. You should not follow any other predatory journals, because in the predatory journal, knowledge is not more authenticate, not more peer reviewed, and it may mislead you, right, from your research methodology. Therefore, the proper indexing journal needs to be followed for good research, right? So how the indexing has been followed? Based on the content, right? So the content of those journals, which is of very high quality, right, and it should be followed peer reviewed process. So it has been reviewed by many other renowned researchers, right? Then subject matter of journal should be compatible with the scope of indexing body, right? Because it is based on subjects, right? Based on the topic, those indexing happens, right? So it should be highly relevant to that particular subject, right? And discipline publishing history. So there should be the discipline of that publishing body also, right? So these are the important facts at higher level. Then authenticity of that journal is very high as per the international standard, and therefore usually people accept those indexing journals, and high indexing journals are always preferred to do the quality research. But a major problem nowadays is there are many predatory publishers, predatory journals, right? And they brag about how many abstracting and indexing services cover their journal. So we need to check those predatory journals, right? Maybe they are linked with the impact factor. So that impact factor is very crucial point. So impact factor of the journal is very high. It means that journal's authenticity, journal's validity into the research community is very high. right? And if those journals impact factor is good, then you can follow those journals and ideas so that authenticity may not be questioned. Okay, so this impact factor was developed by Eugen Garfield as a qualitative method of comparing the journal. Okay, so what they together with Irwin proposed impact factor in 1955 to the journals according to the journal citations. Right. So citation means it is measure of frequency. Okay, with which the average article in the journal has been cited or referred in that particular year or a period. Right. So if some genuine researcher is citing or referring the particular article, it means that article has that standard, and therefore it has referred that article. And that one time referred is one time citation, two time referred is two time citation. It's like that. So the impact, and based on that citation, the impact factor is designed. Right. So what happens is impact factor of journal is calculated by dividing the number of current year citations. Okay, so let's say your journal, journal H index, if you want to calculate the impact factor of the journal, that total number of articles published in the journal 2020 and 2010 and 2011 R50s, right? That goes to the denominator. And in 2012, what are the total number of citations of those journals published in 2010 and 2011? It means last 2 years paper published, number of paper published and their citations, right? So let's say if this citation of this 2 years paper is 500, that goes to the numerator, and number of journals, number of papers goes to the denominator. And if you divide both of them, you will find out the impact factor, right? And in this case, if there is 2010 and 2011 total 50 papers published, the citation was 500 this year, then their impact factor is 500 divided by 50, it's become a 10. So that impact factor is a 2013. It means to get an impact factor of the journal, you have to wait for 3 years at least, right? So last 2 years number of papers, and third year how many number of citations. So that if you divide, you will find the impact factor, right? But that impact factor will be applicable to the date which the journal has been formed, day one, right? So there are the different impact factor agencies which are announcing every 2 year report every 2 year impact factor of the publisher. So this impact factor is not a stable. Keep in mind the impact factor of the journal may increase or may decrease depending on the quality of the papers or quality of the articles published in that particular journals, right? So the impact factor once assigned will be eligible for the date of its birth. So this is the important parameter of indexing and impact factor. So all those indexing journal will have the impact factors. Here, this is just an example of the high quality journals. For example, New England Journal of Medicine, whose impact factor in 2019 is 74. So it's very high impact factor. Similarly, the Lancet, the Nature and Science, Advanced Materials, Energy and Sciences. So these are increasing. I have seen this energy and environmental in 2005. The impact factor was just 6. But the quality of the journal has improved drastically in such way that from 2005 to 2019, that impact factor reached up to 33. So this impact factor can be increased or decreased depending on the quality of the research. Today, left for me. Am I audible? Hello? Am I audible? Yeah. So how long, how much time I do have now to complete this section? Actually, I have many things, but I will wrap up in next 10-15 minutes maybe. Okay, because I'm going more detail about this indexing and all. Okay, that's fine. So development of working hypothesis. So researchers should state it clear terms, working hypothesis. So hypothesis is the formal question that researcher intended to solve, right? So it is sort of theory, right? So it is proposed explanation for an observable phenomenon capable of being tested by the scientific methods, right? So the hypothesis capable of being objectively verified and tested. This is a very important statement. Okay, so being objectively verified and tested, that is nothing but the hypothesis. So what are the characteristics of hypothesis? It should be very clear and precise. If you put forward any theory or any base, right, it should be very clear and precise. Even the layman outside your field should understand that particular hypothesis of your work, right? Then this hypothesis is capable of testing. It should be capable of testing, right? It should not be narrow mind, narrow focus, narrow observations. It should not be limited in a scope. Okay, more specific in a simple terms. It should have explained, and hypothesis should be amenable to testing within the reasonable time. Right? This hypothesis should not take years and years to come to the conclusion. Right? So there should be the reasonable time, and one should not use even an excellent hypothesis. Hypothesis might be the simple, right? But it should not be a lifetime collecting data to test it, right? So the hypothesis actually must explain what it claims to explain. Okay, so these should be the important characteristic of hypothesis. So after hypothesis, we have to come to the research design, right? As we have seen in the previous slide, there are different steps. So after literature search, your observation hypothesis, objectives defining, you should come to the research design, right? And after research design, you should come to the data collection and analysis of data. So those 2-3 points I will cover in 5 to 10 minutes, and I will just wind up this talk. So the research design is the arrangement of condition of collections, analysis of data in a manner that aim to combine the relevant to research purpose with economy in procedure, right? So you should set up the conditions for collecting the data. After collecting, you should design how you want to analyze the data. And after collecting the data, analyzing the data, you should reach up to the conclusion in a specific time or manner, and should have less economical, so as cheaper as possible or cost effective, right? So the blueprint in the research design, you should have the blueprint of your collections, measurements, and analysis of data, what I just now said. So what is an outline of the research design is what researcher will do from writing the hypothesis, right, to its operational implications to the final analysis of data, right? Matlab, it means you know the hypothesis, you know the theory, you know the methodology, how to collect those data, and you come to the conclusion, right? So this is the basic outline of the research design. Okay, so in the research designing so you know the topic, goals, and rationals. You know what is your topic, right? What is the importance of your topic? Then in that process, what are the research questions? What questions are hoping to be answered? So that all questions has to come into your this one, the design of the research, right? Then you know the theoretical frameworks. What are the theories, empirical studies, right? You need to do. Then determining and sequencing the methods. You have to really identify the method, which method I want to use. That is nothing but the design, and you design that particular method. Whether you want to take interviews, whether you want to take the sampling data, whether you want to do the experimental measurements, right? So that is nothing but the designing and sequencing the research method, right? Then site and participation selection. Where will the research take place? In the laboratory or in the public place or in somewhere else? Okay, who will be involved in the research? Right? That all things has to be identified during the research design. Then piloting and refining the research designs and methods. Then you have to really establish, if it is experimental work, you have to establish your lab, collect the glasswares, bench tables, required chemicals. Then you should find out the reaction parameters, reaction conditions. You have all those things, right? So all those collections, piloting and refining the research design and the method is required, and then you have to validate the process whether your process is correct or not, right? You cannot arbitrarily use this method. You have to go and check whether this method is the proper. Is there any technical gap or glitches in between? If it is technically sound, then you can continue with your experimental procedures. So these are the different questions you need to solve or you need to answer during your research design process. So what are the important concept of the relating research designs? So in the research designs here, I have added these important things in the different terms like, variables. There are the various variables available during your research processes, right? And based on that variable, then you have to analyze the data and then you can come to the conclusion. So dependent and independent variables. So what are the variables? Variables is nothing but, right? So concept which can take the different quantitative values. For example, the weight and height and all those things as I discussed before. The phenomena which can take quantitatively different values, even in the decimal point, quantitatively different, is a continuous variable. Discrete variable is there is no linkage. There is just this caps, right? Express the integer value. They can only express the integer value. Then it is called discrete variables. Dependent and independent variable is that if one variable depend on another, it is dependent. If it is not dependent to each other, it is independent variable, right? For example, let's say height depends upon age. In this example, height is your dependent variable and age is your independent variable, right? So another thing is extraneous variable. What is extraneous variable or confounding variable? That independent variables are not related to the purpose of study, but they on the dependent variable, right? So we are not considering those independent variable, but they may affect on the dependent variable. That is called extraneous variables, right? So what is the experimental error? Whatever the effect is noticed, whatever effect is noticed on dependent variable as a result of extraneous variable is technically, right? Means extraneous variable is that what? These variable, whatever the effect on the dependent variable, right? So that is experimental error. Usually those independent variables should not affect on your dependent variable. But if it is interfering in the dependent variable, then it's called experimental error, right? So these are extraneous variables. There are the control. Control is important characteristics that design is to minimize the influence of effect of extraneous variables. So external variables should not affect on your these things. So you have to limit the influence of external variable is nothing but the control, right? So the experimental research in term of control is referred as restrained experimental conditions. So experimental conditions should not be changed or affected by the external parameters. That is called as a control. Then experimental and control groups, right? In an experimental hypothesis, what happens? Testing research when a group is exposed to the usual conditions, it is termed as a control. But when group is exposed to some novel or special conditions, okay, that is not a usual condition, then it is an experimental group, right? But what is the treatment then? The different conditions under which experimental and control groups are put usually referred as a treatment, right? So there are the different conditions which can called as treatments. So these are the different research design. I don't want to go into detail about this. Then methods of the data collections. There are various methods of data collections people have used. First one is secondary sources and primary sources. In the primary sources, this data is sort of surveys and questionnaires, interviews, and observations, right? And the secondary is you have the different government documents, service records, and all those data is available there. But it doesn't relate to our scientific research, so I just skipped. But the qualitative data analysis, so this is the important part of the scientific research. What happens is data collections through your observations, documentation, recordings, and interviews. Once you have a huge data, you have to reduce the data by the selecting some specific selection rules focused on your interest of the data, then simplify the data and all those things. After reducing the data, this data should display in different monograms, networks, charts, and forms graphical presentation of your data. For example, data displays nothing but graphical presentation so that you can draw nice conclusion through the graphical representations. Usually in the science, we draw many graphs, and from the plots we can draw the conclusions. So this is how the data analysis should be done. Now data collection, there are the different methods we have seen. This is the data analysis method. So what should be the approach in data analysis? That deductive approach and inductive approach. Instead of explaining, I will just show you this slide. And in this slide, you see the deductive approach. You have the focused question, then code and group the answer from the different question, and then you come to the number one express pyramid, where you find a vast amount of data from multiple sources, general question of the phenomena. Then you conceptualize those data by the characterizing, quoting, and as per the theme, you just segregate those data and overreacting things and theories by different data. You can call it as inductive analysis, right? So these are the different analysis tools available. There are manual analysis people can do, but nowadays a lot of softwares are available. The computer assisted methods usually people use in the laboratories. A lot of softwares are designed to find the systematic scientific, and from that analysis you can interpret the data properly. Then you reduce this unwanted data and display in the different forms, and then you can draw your conclusion. So what conclusion? Let's come to the end point of this presentation today. So what is the conclusion? Conclusion is nothing but, to help the reader understand why your research should matter to them after they have finished reading your research article. Let's say you have read the research, you have written a research article, and conclusion is nothing but you have to highlight the importance of your research, why this research is very important to community or to anyone else, right? After reading your paper, those laymen should understand, right? And conclusion is not only the summary of your points of restatement of your research problem, but the synthesis of the key points. What are the key points you have done in your research, right? What are the clear indications from your research, and all those important parts there, right? So let's go to a little about this conclusion. So well-written conclusion demonstrate overall understanding of the research problem to the readers, right? In that, presenting the last word on an issue you raise in your paper, right? This is the one point. Second is summarizing your thoughts and conveying implication of your study is another goal of this conclusion. Demonstrating importance of your idea is another important point should be covered in your conclusion. And introducing possible new fundable ways of thinking, right? So you have to lead readers to the futuristic development and further development required in your work or in the community thinking about the similar research problem. So if those four purposes have been solved, then your conclusion is complete. And with this, I would like to thank all of you. If anyone has a question, I would like to receive your questions. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, I am Dr. Wadhwa from Department of Chemistry, KBP College, Vashi. I'm here to give overall vote of thanks for this national level research methodology workshop. This workshop was carried under the aegis of RUSA. This workshop was carried for the students of undergraduate as well as postgraduate student as well as faculty. So I sincerely thankful to RUSA to give funding for this workshop. I am thankful to our Secretary Rayat Shikshan Sanstha Satara, Dr. V.S. Shivankar sir. I am thankful to Dr. Principal of this college, Dr. Shubha Nayak madam. I am thankful to my head department of chemistry, Dr. R.D. Mohite sir. I am thankful to convener of this conference, Gayatri madam, organizing secretary of this conference and treasurer of this conference, faculties like Dr. L.V. Gavli sir, Dr. V.A. Vikas Thakur sir, Mr. Y. Gaikwad sir, who has supported this workshop wholeheartedly, and we can complete this workshop successfully. Most of students take benefit of this workshop. Our friend Dr. Praveen Walke sir, Dr. Singh sir has given nice talk on this workshop. Without them, this workshop is not possible to complete. So I am thankful to all resource person, all teaching, non-teaching staff, not but least my dear students and all faculties. I am thankful to all for completing this workshop very nice manner. So with these words, I will say this workshop is over. Certificates are given online mode to respective groups after 2 or 3 days. Thank you, one and all. Thank you. Okay.